I'm Kent George. We work in the Philippines on the island of Palawan, up in the jungles in southern Palawan. We're missionaries with AFM, and this is my wife, Leonda. You have anything to say more that I left out? Okay. Well, 25 years ago, or more than 25 years ago, when we went to Palawan, you know, you want to go as a missionary and all of that, but when you arrive there, you know, you sort of have this idea that when I arrive, you know, everything will fall into place, we'll know. But you arrive and then you say, now what do I do? Because the Philippines is known for baptisms, you know, well, you're supposed to go and baptize people. Well, they baptize tons of people in the Philippines. Most of them don't stay in the church. They don't even come, they don't even show up the next Sabbath. So what is the purpose of baptizing somebody if they never show up again? It's you know, so what do? You build churches, what do you do? And so you have to grapple with this and decide, what is our purpose for being here? And I think ultimately, I came to a very basic purpose, and that is we want to see people in the kingdom of God. That's the ultimate thing. Because what good is a baptized Adventist who never makes it to the kingdom? That's, you know, you haven't accomplished your purpose. And I think the section, one of the sections in the Bible that really impressed me was Isaiah 58. It's talking about Israel. At this time, Israel was very, very concerned about doing everything right. Excuse me. They, you know, they had their services down. They had everything going the way they should. Everybody did everything. They fasted and everything. And for a lot of people, they look and say, wow, they're really religious. But this is what God has to say about them, because he equates fasting with their religiosity. And he says, is not this the fast? First of all, he gets after them. He says, behold, ye fast to strife and debate and to smite with the fist of wickedness. Ye shall not fast as ye do this day, to make your voice to be heard on high. In other words, you know, hey, I'm right, you're right. I'm sure they were arguing theology. They were arguing methods. They were saying, you're doing it wrong. No, you're doing it wrong. And this is what God says. He says, is it such a fast that I have chosen a day for a man to afflict his soul, is it to bow down his head? See, no, this is not it. He says, is not this the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and that ye break every yoke? Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out to thy house? When thou seest the naked, that thou cover him, and that thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh? Then shall thy light break forth as the morning. Obviously, they were going through the rituals, but it was a totally dead thing. And he's saying, if you do these things, then shall thy light break forth as the morning, and thy health shall spring forth speedily, and thy righteousness shall go before thee, and the glory of the Lord shall be thy reward. Then shalt thou call, and the Lord shall answer. Thou shalt cry, and he shall say, here I am. If thou take away from the midst of thee the yoke, the putting forth of the finger, and speaking vanity. And if thou draw out thy soul to the hungry, and satisfy the afflicted soul, then shall thy light rise in obscurity, and thy darkness be as the noonday. And you just read that, and he says, this is what religion is all about. It's not a bunch of forms. It's not a bunch of rituals. It's not a bunch of... If that is the heart of your religion, it's a dead religion. And so it helped me to realize, you know, that's what we're supposed to be doing. The bottom line, caring about people. especially the people who are the down and out that nobody else cares about. In the Matthew 25, and not the parable, it's not a parable at all, it's telling what will happen in the future. They talk about when Jesus comes and the separating of the sheep and the goat. And those who are chosen to go to heaven, they say, why? And he says, because when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was in need, you helped me. And it's interesting when you read in chapter 70 of Desire of Ages, Ellen White makes this statement, which suddenly I hadn't realized it for a long time, but I'd read it in the Bible. She says, this is the final deciding factor of who goes to heaven and who does not. How we treat those people. And you ask most Adventists, you ask them, what is the deciding factor? They say, well, Jesus died on the cross. And they say, no, some will be lost, some will be saved. What is that final? And they have no idea. And it says right there in Matthew 25, it's because you cared about people. And we know in the last day that people from all denominations will come into God's church. Many Adventists will leave. But those people who truly cared, because that's the kind of character God wants in His kingdom. So this morning I'm going to just tell a story or two from Palawan and how this has worked out. Of course, you know, you're thinking, well, we need to raise up a church and everything, but I'd say one of our greatest success stories is probably our God's success story that I'm the proudest about is Jillian was born in the mountains in a nipa hut. Her mother died of malaria just shortly after she was born.
3 months old.
She was 3 months old, and her mother died. And Boobet, her sister, tells about how they were the only ones there. They had to dig the grave. They had to put their mother's body into the grave and cover it up. And so not too long after that, within a year or two, Jillian's father died. He had drunk too much tuba, that's their local liquor, and he had cirrhosis of the liver, and that killed him. And so she's an orphan. We arrived about shortly after Jillian was born. The reason her mother died, there were no missionaries there at that time, and so there was nobody to care for, you know, somebody with malaria. Anyway, so Jillian sort of bounced around. She was watched by student missionaries, you know, sort of this and that. Anyway, she continued to grow, and, you know, about 6, 7, 8 years old, Boobet, her sister, left Kamantian, and then Jillian disappeared. We thought that I think we were aware that Boobet had taken her, but she just disappeared. We had no idea where she was. We knew she'd gone to the lowlands. We never heard of her. And it was several years until one day Nixon, Jillian's brother, was down in Nara, which is quite a distance. You know, it's a 3-hour hike into the mountains. You get on a shuttle, go for an hour. He was in Nara. I'm not sure why. He had some relatives there. And he was at the open market, and he comes around the corner, and here's Jillian in the open market.
Young girl.
You know, she's about 8 years old, 9, something like that. And he says, Jillian, what are you doing here? And what we found out is that she basically had been a slave in the lowlands, that the lowlanders believe that the native people up in the mountains, the only thing they're good for is to be your servant or your slave. You know, that they're not good for anything else. And so she had, you know, done, you know, she'd live with a family and they'd tell her everything to do, you know. Hey, it's night, it's late at night, nobody wants to go way out there where you get water, so Jillian, you go out there and get water. It didn't matter that she was afraid of the dark, you go get the water, and so she'd have to go do it. She slept under the bed with the dog.
Under the table.
Yeah, under the table with the dog. when they ate the meal, she did not eat with them. She served them. If there was food left over, she had the food to eat. They'd go out late at night to do something. They would lock up the house and leave Jillian on the front porch there and wouldn't let her in until they finally showed up at 12 o'clock at night. They would beat her. I mean, each time I talked to her, I'd hear another story, you know, where they'd beat her until she was unconscious. And anyway, now we knew where Jillian was. So we talked to her other sister, Momo, and we said, let's go get Jillian. We'll solve this problem. We'll bring her back to the mountains. We'll bring her back to Kamantian and everything will be fine again. You know, she can lead a normal life. And so one day we went down there and we found where she was, and she'd given Nixon her address, and we said, Jillian, we're here to get you. And of course the people said, no, we love Jillian, we like her. Well, I'm sure they did love all the work she did and everything. And anyway, amazingly enough, they were able to get a hold of Boobit, and somehow they grudgingly got this consent. And so we ended up taking Jillian back to the mountains. And we thought the problems were all solved.
We took her back, but she went to live with her
She went to live with her older sister. Well, when you've grown up like that with no family, with no supervision, with nothing, coming back to the mountains does not necessarily solve the problem. Because Jillian was a free spirit. She did as she pleased. Now that there was nobody beating her and all of that, she was incorrigible. She
very strong-willed.
Very strong-willed. You know, and we realized she needs a mother and father who will, you know, can say, Jillian, no, that does not happen. You know, she needed some authority. Her sister did not provide that authority. She was running all over. She was getting herself in trouble. She was doing all of this. And we're just saying, oh, Lord, what do we do now? And so finally we're just praying. We're saying, God, what is the answer? What is the answer to this? Jillian, by this time, you know, she's 10 years old and she's a terror around there, just doing whatever she pleases. And as we prayed, suddenly we were impressed. Like God was saying, why don't you adopt her? And it was like, what? I don't think that's possible here in the Philippines. You know, we're Americans. I don't think that's possible. So I went to the lowlands and I spoke with a friend down there. He's a missionary for another denomination. He said, oh yes, they just changed the law. You can adopt. So we began that process. She moved into our house. We became her mother and father. That process started at 11 years old, did not finish till she was almost 16. If she had been adopted after 16, she never would have been able to come to the United States or anything. And she got her U.S. passport the day before her 16th birthday. But that was not, we have 4 children of our own. Believe me, Jillian was the hardest one we ever had. She was tough. And actually it was Betty Reynolds, wasn't it? Dr. Connie Reynolds, who gave us a little book about these kind of kids, and it told how to deal with them. And you'd read it, and the things they said to do, you say, what? That doesn't make sense. But it worked. I mean, you know. And it was interesting. You know, one time I was talking with Jillian, you know, we were talking, why are you acting this way, Jillian? And here she's just 12 years old or something like that. And she said to me, and I thought this was very perceptive for a 12-year-old, she says, I'm afraid to love you. That's why I act this way. Because I've been hurt so much in the past, I'm afraid. You know, she was testing to see
everybody
whether
I've loved has been taken from me.
So it was an incredible challenge. But the neat thing is that God works through those things. And today, Jillian is now 24, I think.
Oh, she's...
But the neat thing is, here I'll pass this around. Here's a picture of Jillian, and I'll tell you about what she's doing now. Jillian got married, and I was with her one day.
The large picture.
The large picture, that's Jillian, yeah. And Jillian got married, and now we were at a church. It was one of our churches in the lowlands. We have one church you can actually drive to. All the rest you have to hike to or go by helicopter or something. And she was there, and a lady came up to her and says, I know a baby is born with club feet. The parents don't want it. They're in the process of starving it to death. They don't want to kill it outright because they could get in trouble, so they're starving it to death. And Jillian said, I want that baby. I mean, just like that. I've always told Jillian, I said, Jillian, you're too quick in making decisions. You know, you need to think about. Well, this was one instance where it was the right thing, because when that baby came, it was on the verge of death. It was so weak. The only thing that it could move was its eyes. It would just lie there, and its eyes were watching. And those eyes were incredible, because it was eyes that were, you could see it was saying, what's coming next? You could see that it had been abused, it had been mistreated, and it spent almost a month in the hospital after we got it. And she is adopting that child. Her name is Lonnie, and
Her name is Leonda Hope.
yeah,
Named after me.
Leonda Hope, we call her Lonnie. And today it was a miracle. God worked it out for free. Okay, there's Jillian right there, and this is a little more of the story. I'll be hitting a little later on when these pictures were taken. But anyway, Lonnie, it was a miracle. Her feet were straightened out for free. There was a clinic in Puerto Princesa that was their specialty. We were praying because we took her to a doctor who just did everything wrong, made a mess of it. And so we prayed, and God opened up this clinic, and for free they straightened up her feet. And I'm sure Lonnie, you know, one time we weren't even sure if she would be able to walk or anything because she had been starved. She was a year and a half old, and she weighed 4 kilos. I mean, she was about the weight of a newborn.
And she's a year and a half.
And a year and a half old. But now, incredibly, she's just a happy, vivacious little child. She's about 5 years old.
She's 5 years old. She doesn't speak.
Yeah, she's still learning to talk. I mean, it's like the treatment she got, you know, at the beginning has slowed down her development. But she is one of the most cheerful, happy little girls I have ever met, just filled with joy. And so I was so proud of Jillian here. We adopted her, and then she turns around and she adopts this little girl who is in so much need. If she had not done that, Lonnie would not have lived. She was, you know, there was no hope. And but that was not all. Some time ago, not too long ago, we were getting messages from a little village called Marma, maybe 8 hours hike from where we are. They were saying, we want a school. We really want a school. Can you send us a missionary? Can you send us a missionary? And we kept looking around. Anybody want to go? Anybody want to go? Now, by this time, Jillian is living in a little house just below our house in Camantian. It's really nice. They're right close by. You know, our grandkids are there. Jillian has 3 children now, including Lonnie. And we kept looking for somebody who would go to Marmot. Nobody would. And finally Jillian came, and she and Junie, her husband, said, we will go to Marmot. We will leave our house here. We will go to Marmot.
Where there is nothing.
We will open up our you know, the work there. And so they went on over there. They live in this little house with a tarp on the roof. They're building it up there, and they have these pictures here were taken in Marma just a few weeks after they had first moved there. And so,
I've got a bunch of pictures.
you know, I just stop and I think, isn't this God's way? You know, we didn't go and have an evangelistic series or something like that. What we did is we saw a need, or God showed us a need. And we were a little bit uncertain about it, but we followed up. And we adopted Jillian, and look how it has gone on from there. That's the way God does things. And that's not the only thing that Jillian, there's a girl over in
Marama.
Consuli.
Oh?
Yeah, Delia.
Oh, okay.
Consuli, and she had been raped by her brother and became pregnant. And incest is a very, very taboo thing in mountains there. And so the Gungarangs, the old men, got together and said, this is a big problem. How are we going to solve this problem? And so they discussed it at length. As anytime they have a meeting, it goes on forever and ever because everybody has a story to tell. And finally, their solution, and this shows what happens when you don't have a moral code set up by the Bible or something like this. Their solution was, we will kill the baby when it is born. That will solve the problem. And so anyway, Delia had her baby. And then now the big question, okay, we decide to kill the baby, but who's going to kill the baby? And so they're negotiating about who's going to kill the baby someday. And Jillian finds out about this. She lets us know. And she says, you have to adopt Delia.
Basically, she said we, because it's like
Yeah,
bringing...
we. And so we were not in a position to adopt her, but we did go to the lowlands. We became her legal guardians. Delia came into our home, and now she's like another daughter to us.
And
but
another grandchild.
And another grandchild. And
Here, it's not a real big, you can maybe, but this is a picture.
Can you show us what magazine you're looking, that article?
Okay, this is the Adventist Frontiers magazine.
What month is that?
That is, let's see, what month is it? That's
what got torn
That's
off.
a secret.
It should say down here, July.
July 2021. Yeah. Thanks to Don, he has these magazines. We're not getting them. We haven't gotten them for almost a year because of COVID.
This is a picture that's taken in Marma. You could maybe play with it a little bit, but that's Kent and I with Jillian's family and Delia and Honey. Her daughter, she named her Honey Lynn.
Yeah, Honey Lynn. So,
actually, Jillian probably named her Honey Lynn.
Probably so. Anyway, you know, as I look back, you know, sometimes when you're out there working, you get discouraged because sometimes you know, in opposition to this, you know, the first baptism in Kamantian, you know, oh, we finally got baptisms, you know, that kind of thing. That individual has dropped out of the church and become one of our biggest enemies.
After about 2 decades.
Yeah. And he
was in the church about 2 decades.
And because of his influence, his influence is tearing down the work that is being done there. And we're just praying, okay, God, this is your project. You're going to have to do something because we don't know exactly how to deal with this problem. But it just shows that, you know, going out in baptism, saying, well, we got 1,000 baptisms, that is not necessarily the best way to do it. And I just say, as I look at it, I say that when we go out there, what we're doing is we are looking for the rest of the family. That's what we're doing. We're looking for the rest of the family. Have you ever gone somewhere and you find some relative that you've never known existed, and you say, oh, wow, you were related to Uncle John. Well, that's, you know, when you find that, you don't forget that person, you know. They're a part of your family. And that's the thing, is that we are looking for the rest of the family. I'm not big on this hit and run evangelism where you go in, baptize a ton of people, and then just disappear and forget them all. That we are called to find the rest of the family. I think of the Samuel, the priest. He could have said, okay, I've been a priest for 20 years. I think that's good enough. I'm going to go open a little store and sell used, something or other. I'm going to do something. Yeah, I'll sit in on the board and do my part. No, Samuel, he was a priest of God his entire life. It was his life calling. And when we follow Jesus, it's not just something that we do, well, let's put in our few years here and then let's get back. Let's go back to the United States and enjoy the joyful things there that we can have, live the good life, because really here in the U.S., this country is so incredibly blessed. One of the things that has impressed me this last time I've come is the amount of money here, what people have. It's just incredible. People don't realize when you go to these foreign countries and see how little people have. I go in and look in a dumpster and say, wow, this would be a treasure trove over there. So, and there's nothing wrong with being blessed, but God gives blessings so that we can pass those blessings on to others. The day will come, the Bible states, the day will come when we stand before the throne of God, and he says, I gave you all these blessings. In the Bible, it's called talents. I gave you so many talents. What did you do with those talents? Did you gain something or did you not? With those blessings, did you distribute those blessings to those who had nothing? That's the question he's going to ask us. And we want to be able to say, thank you for those blessings. We were able to do a great deal because you gave us those blessings. We handed those blessings off to others. And, in retrospect, looking back 25 years, I'm so proud of Jillian. I'm so proud of Delia. Whenever we get discouraged, I say, look, if we came here just for Jillian, if we just came here for Delia, if that was the only thing, it was still worth it. It was definitely worth it. But I'm sure the picture is going to be much bigger. But we won't know. Not until we get to heaven will we be able to see how far whatever we did worked for God. Yes?
Elder George, you were a pastor before you went. How did you come to go with AFM to a faraway country like the Philippines and way up in the mountains even there?
Well, we had always had the dream of going as missionaries. We had approached the church 2 or 3 times, and of course, that was always a dead-end street. There was no way that could happen because the church really doesn't send out missionaries anymore.
Don't send out pastors.
Yeah. So when AFM came along, we were very interested in that. In the meantime, when I first heard of AFM, that was when I was in seminary. And after that, I became a pastor in Georgia Cumberland Conference. And God blessed me with a church that was 50% Yankees and 50% Confederates. and they did a lot of fighting. And so it was not a comfortable place, which was a good thing because I know that if I'd settled in where it was comfortable, I might never have gone. But of course, as it became uncomfortable, sort of the idea of missions came up again. And eventually we followed that dream, and that's how we ended up there. We didn't even know where we were going to go. We just said, God, we don't know where we should go. You open the doors. You show us where we should go. And that's how we ended up in Palawan. And I've always liked flying, so I thought, I want to go a place where we have to have an airplane. Well, we got there and there was no airplane. Finally, I said, okay, God, if an airplane ever shows up for any purpose, this is going to be really hard getting a airstrip in Kamantian. I mean, you might get a 500-foot airstrip. So I said, I give up on that dream. That's in your hands. If you want that to happen, that's up to you. You know what? God gave us an airplane, brand new, and it will land on a 500-foot airstrip.
And we got it after like 24 years.
After 24 years, and I tell people, when God says to give everything to Him, He doesn't just mean to give up your sins and everything. He means to give up your hopes, your dreams, everything you long for. Give it to Him. And I guarantee you, He'll give it back later on far better than you could ever have done for yourself. Because now we have an airplane there, but it has a purpose. It's not just something to fly around with and enjoy. I mean, just before we left, we haven't had the airplane very long, but Jillian was up there in Marma, and they got hit by a typhoon, and she calls up, she says, of course, it's a 5-hour hike in there. She said, well, we need some tarps up here. we're getting soaking wet. Is there any way you can get them in? So we were able to fly up that canyon all the way into Marmot and drop in some tarps and, take care of that problem. So it's just exciting to see how God leads and opens doors and just does incredible things. And He's just looking for people who are obedient. When you go with God, you may be in for a wild ride, but you're going to get through. He does some. It sounds like crazy things, but that's the way God is. He lives outside the box. So that's just a little taste of a little bit that's going on in Kamantian and how God has led.
Here's a picture of the airplane. I guess in this picture they're still putting it together.
This airplane is the first of its kind that I know of has gone into mission work. And actually, this airplane, you know what the inspiration for this airplane is? The Heliocourier. The Heliocourier was a very expensive mission plane. This is a smaller version of the Heliocourier, but it's much less expensive to operate. Because we have a helicopter there, GMI has a helicopter there, but the fuel alone for that is well over $100 an hour. It burns 50 gallons an hour, whereas this airplane burns about 4 gallons an hour of auto gas.
Yeah. So it costs about the same to drive it in a car.
Yeah. So, whenever we fly the helicopter, we need to be really, really sure that we
maximize.
We're going to have a maximum load. There's going to be a full 400 kilos on that helicopter when it flies. But with this, if you can jump in it and use it and not have to worry so much about the cost. And the nice thing while I'm gone is that Daniel, the helicopter pilot, I told him, come on over and fly the airplane every couple of weeks so that the ants and all the cockroaches and everything stay out of it and it stays in good running condition. So he's been flying it for us while we were gone.
Well, and he's still getting proficient in it too.
Yeah, he's
so
getting
that
proficient.
Between the two of them, they can make flights.
How long does it take from your place to your daughter's place, the mountain?
In the mountains?
By airplane?
If by airplane, well, what we figure is that by the helicopter and the airplane have about the same cruise speed, and the way we figure it is 1 hour on foot is equal 1 minute in the airplane. So if you're going from Kamantian to Marmot, where Jillian is, if you're flying from over Kamantian onto Marmot, well, in that case, it's probably less than 9 minutes, probably 5 minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
But
I
it
mean-
takes 9 hours to hike between
Yeah.
Montian and her place.
Our
Or
farth-
from the lowlands into her place is 5
Yeah.
hours.
Our farthest outreach, which is a Cub Gun, is over on the other side of the island. If you hike there from Camantian, it'll take you an entire day.
Like
You know, if
14,
you start out,
14 hours.
you start out early in the morning and you get there hopefully before dark. And if you fly, it's about 15 minutes.
So there's landing strips at these other places?
Well-
Helicopter landing strips.
Well,
so far.
we're building more strips. In Marma, they're building a strip right now. They have a ridge coming out. They can put in probably at least a 400 or 500 foot strip. So they have. But where there isn't, we can at least fly over. Like if they have malaria and they have no medicine, we can at least fly over, drop in supplies, things like that. And if worse comes to worse, the helicopter's there. You know, if somebody's life is in danger, if it's a major medical emergency, then we can rely on the helicopter. So we feel very blessed that way because now we can put people in areas where, you know, it would be rather risky if they were to get sick because it's so hard to get out. But now we know that if you have a risky situation, somebody gets sick, we can still, one way or another, go in and take care of them. So, anyway, that's the privilege that God has given us to work there, and we just wait and see how God leads in every situation. I mean, what we find is that when everything's going smoothly, we sometimes ask, are we doing something wrong? Because I'll tell you, the devil, when you're doing something useful, the devil, I mean, we had the government, people in the government trying to shut down all our schools. I mean, and God miraculously just changed that around. Now the Department of Education is happy with us, but unfortunately we're finding now they're trying to dictate how we run things, which some of their dictating is not the way we want to run things. So it's always a challenge, you know, finding how to do it. There's always somebody trying to stop you. Either it's the communist rebels who are backed by the governor, or it's the military, or you never know what is the next thing that's going to try to stop you. So keep up the good work. Keep people going out and doing something.